First, though, let's speak to Sara Khairat, who's in Tel Aviv. So, Sara, the captives have been handed over to the Red Cross. They're on the Egyptian side of that border crossing, the Rafah crossing. At this stage, this is, I dare say, a pretty well-rehearsed scenario. What happens to them from here?
That's right. Now, we know that they're on their way via the Egyptians to be handed over to the Israelis, and then eventually they'll make their way to Israel through a separate border crossing. The drill has usually been that they would then be flown from an Israeli military base to any of the designated hospitals. There's a number of them. But every single day has slightly been different depending on who's been released, who's more critical. And then you had one of the days where some of them were released in central Gaza rather than closer to that Rafah crossing. But in terms of those that have currently been released, one of them is a teenager. The rest are women. The Qatar Foreign Ministry has also tweeted saying that it's one Austrian citizen, 2 Argentinians and a Filipino citizen is amongst those that have been released. Now, in terms of the ages, you'll see here that they are older, they're women, whereas in the last few days we've been seeing a lot more children. But certainly here in the square there are questions being raised because it seems there are still a couple of babies, the youngest being a 10-month-old, and there are questions as to why they haven't been released yet. And
Sara, now that Hamas has released dozens of Israeli captives over the last 5 days now, we're starting to get a somewhat better picture of what their captivity has been like. What have you learned over the last few days?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the stories are coming through slowly, and that's because all of those that are held captive are often taken to the hospitals to be reunited with their family members. They have to undergo medical and physical and psychological checks and to ensure that they are ready to go home. But just earlier, one of those that was released right at the beginning, an 85-year-old woman, is the first to actually come and join people here in what's become known as Hostage Square, where families are rallying and holding sit-ins every single day, and they say they will continue to be here until all of those captives are released. Well, of course, there was a massive media scrum to try and speak to her and hear her thoughts, and the understanding is that her husband is still being held captive. And in terms of the testimonies that you were just asking me about, there's been various stories. The latest is that one of the kids was made to see videos of what happened on October 7. Of course, it's very hard to verify that because, you know, we certainly haven't been able to speak to any of the captives, those that were at least held captive just yet, but also details of them saying that they'd been in these big halls, the type of food they were eating, and just general day-to-day what the situation was like. For example, no electricity apart from often sometimes 2 hours. But people are moving past that. They're looking forward. They want to know whether the men are going to be released, if there is a potential extension to this 2-day extension for the ceasefire. And already there's talk swirling around and rumors and Israeli media reporting that unconfirmed military sources or those that are in the know are saying that there potentially could be an extension, but only looking up to 10 days. Well, now we're on day 6. That was 5, correction. That would leave us with 5 more days. But again, it's still unconfirmed. It's still not clear. But one thing that is certain is that people are telling us that there are those that are still quite vulnerable that need to be released sooner rather than later. And then, of course, the next, once the women and children have been released, the hope is that it will be men.
Sara, I wonder what the Israeli public wants and what your sense is of that, because the Israeli government says it's ready to start the war again as soon as this ceasefire ends, but at the same time, it's actively negotiating to extend the ceasefire. So what do Israelis want?
Look, a general public opinion here is that Hamas has to go, and certainly the line that the government and the military has constantly reiterated, and just earlier hearing once again from Daniel Hagari, the spokesman for the military, is that that remains the ultimate goal, that they need to get rid of Hamas to ensure that attack like that doesn't happen ever again. In terms of what the families are thinking right now, it doesn't seem to be that they want that fighting to start again, because if that happens, there is potential that their own relatives could get killed in those airstrikes. And they just want to ensure, as the #1 priority, is that their family members, their relatives, do make it home. Earlier, we were talking to one lady who's a friend of a family of an Ethiopian that was an Israeli Ethiopian that was kidnapped years ago. And he's still held in captivity in Gaza. And they're saying that it's not just the ones that are being held captive right now from October 7, but you have two others. One is Israeli Ethiopian and the other one is a Bedouin. And they say that there's still no word on what happened to them. And again, they're hoping that those two men could also potentially be released when hopefully more, as they say, more will be released other than just the women and children.
Sara Khairat reporting from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for that, Sara. It's 9 p.m. where you are. That means, and we just learned that the Israeli captives have been released now from Gaza. They're on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing. They're with the ICRC. It could be a couple hours yet before they are flown over to Tel Aviv or its surroundings. Thank you very much. Now let's